They cut down his 200-year-old tree without permission, and it cost them over $1 million. The day everything changed, stop scrolling, because this is the exact moment an HOA made the most expensive mistake of their lives. It was supposed to be an ordinary Tuesday morning. Mark stepped outside his home just after sunrise, coffee still warm in his hand, expecting the familiar peace he enjoyed every day. The air was calm, the sky was clear, but something felt wrong. Instead of birds chirping or leaves gently rustling in the breeze, he heard a loud, violent noise that didn't belong. Chainsaws. At first he thought it had to be coming from down the street. Maybe a neighbor was doing yard work. But the sound was too close. Far too close. His chest tightened as he followed the noise toward his backyard, and then he saw it. His massive oak tree, towering, ancient, and breathtaking, was being cut down. Workers in hard hats moved around it like this. Was just another routine job. Branches were crashing to the ground. Wood chips flew through the air. The tree that had defined Mark's home was being destroyed right in front of him. Mark froze. This wasn't just any tree. That oak had stood there for nearly 200 years. It existed long before the neighborhood was built, long before paved roads, streetlights, and fences. It had survived storms, droughts, and generations of change. When Mark bought the house, that tree was one of the main reasons he said yes. It wasn't decoration, it wasn't landscaping, it was history. The tree provided shade during scorching summers, lowering energy bills. It sheltered birds and wildlife. It gave the property character, soul, and value. To Mark, it felt like losing a living piece of the land itself. Panicking, Mark shouted for the workers to stop. He demanded to know who had authorized this. The chainsaws went quiet. One of the workers walked over and casually explained that they were just following orders. Then came the three words that changed everything. HOA approved it. Mark couldn't believe what he was hearing. No letter had ever arrived. No phone, call, no email, no warning of any kind. The homeowners association had decided, without his consent, that his tree needed to be removed. According to them, it violated landscaping guidelines and posed a potential risk. And that was it. Case closed. Mark immediately told them to stop. He insisted they had no right to touch his property. But the workers explained they were under contract and couldn't halt the job without authorization from the HOA. Shaking, Mark pulled out his phone and called his lawyer. But time was not on his side. By the time legal advice came through, it was already too late. The final cut was made. The enormous oak groaned as it fell. 2 centuries of life crashed into the dirt in seconds. When the dust settled, all that remained was a pile of logs and a massive stump where history once stood. Mark stood there in silence. Anger turned into disbelief. Disbelief turned into heartbreak. But heartbreak didn't last long, because what the HOA didn't know, what they never bothered to check, was that this tree wasn't just emotionally valuable, it was legally protected and incredibly expensive. Mark's lawyer arrived later that day and took one look at the remains. Instead of calming Mark down, he said something unexpected. "This is going to be big." That oak tree, it turned out, was classified under local preservation laws. Trees of that age and size were considered irreplaceable. Removing one without permits wasn't just a mistake, it was a serious legal violation. The more experts got involved, the worse it became for the HOA. The tree had environmental value, historical value, property value. When professional arborists calculated the total loss, including replacement value, ecological damage, and legal penalties, the number stunned everyone involved. Over $1 million. What the HOA thought was a routine landscaping decision had just become a financial nightmare. And this was only the beginning. Because the day that tree fell was the day the HOA learned a lesson they would never forget. At first, the HOA thought this whole situation would blow over. To them, it was simple. It was just a tree, a landscaping issue, a minor violation of neighborhood guidelines. They believed Mark might be upset for a few weeks, but eventually, he would calm down and move on. After all, trees get removed all the time, right? They were very, very wrong. When Mark contacted his lawyer, he didn't just want an apology, he wanted answers. And those answers started with one professional, a certified arborist. The arborist arrived at the property just days after the tree had been cut down. He walked slowly around the massive stump, measuring its diameter. He examined the growth rings in the remaining wood. He studied old photographs of the tree standing tall in the yard. The deeper he looked, the more serious his expression became. Finally, he said the words that changed everything. This wasn't an ordinary oak. That tree was estimated to be nearly 200 years old, but age alone wasn't the issue. Its size, historical presence, and ecological impact qualified it for something far more important. It met the criteria for designation under local heritage tree protection laws. That meant one critical thing. It could not legally be removed without special city permits and environmental review, and no such permits had ever been requested. The HOA hadn't just ignored Mark, they had ignored the law. But it didn't stop there. As the legal team dug deeper, they discovered the true impact of what had been destroyed. This tree wasn't just part of the landscape, it was a fully functioning environmental asset. For decades, it had provided shade that significantly reduced cooling costs during hot summers. Experts calculated that the tree likely saved thousands of dollars in energy expenses over its lifetime. Its root system prevented soil erosion, protecting the foundation of the home and surrounding properties. Its canopy absorbed carbon dioxide and filtered pollutants from the air. It provided habitat for birds and wildlife, contributing to the local ecosystem. It increased curb appeal and property value, not just for Mark's home, but for the entire neighborhood. When environmental consultants and property valuation experts compiled their reports, the numbers started stacking up quickly. Replacement value alone was enormous. You cannot simply plant a 200-year-old tree overnight. The cost of sourcing, transporting, and re-establishing a mature tree of similar size, if even possible, was astronomical. Then came the ecological damages, then the loss of property value, then legal penalties for unauthorized removal of a protected heritage tree. When everything was added together, the final estimate shocked everyone involved. The loss exceeded $1 million. Suddenly, what the HOA had dismissed as a routine landscaping decision had turned into a financial disaster. Inside the HOA board, panic began to spread. Emails started flying between members. Emergency meetings were scheduled. Lawyers were hired. Board members who once confidently defended their decision were now asking one terrifying question: how did we not know? Some tried to argue they believed the tree posed a safety risk. Others claimed they misunderstood local regulations. But the truth was simple. They never properly checked. They assumed authority. They assumed control. They assumed there would be no consequences. But now, they were facing a lawsuit backed by expert testimony, environmental law, and a mountain of documentation. Insurance companies began reviewing coverage. Residents started whispering about potential increases in HOA fees. Homeowners questioned the competence of the board. The confidence the HOA once had, gone. In its place was fear. And Mark? He wasn't yelling anymore. He wasn't pacing his yard in anger. He wasn't arguing with neighbors. He was calm, focused, prepared. Because this was no longer about emotion, it was about accountability. With expert reports in hand and the law clearly on his side, Mark understood something the HOA was just beginning to realize. They hadn't simply cut down a tree, they had destroyed a protected historical landmark, and now they were going to pay for it. The shocking truth wasn't just that the tree was valuable. The shocking truth was that their single careless decision had created $1 million mistake. And the real battle had only just begun. The lawsuit didn't stay quiet for long. What started as a dispute between a homeowner and his HOA quickly turned into a legal battle that made headlines across the region. News outlets picked up the story. Social media exploded. People everywhere were asking the same question. How could an HOA cut down a 200-year-old tree without permission? Inside the courtroom, the tension was thick. The HOA's legal team argued their case with confidence at first. They claimed they were simply maintaining community standards. According to them, the tree posed a potential risk and violated neighborhood landscaping rules. They insisted their actions were taken in the best interest of the community. But the judge wasn't convinced. As evidence was presented, the truth became impossible to ignore. The HOA had acted without proper authority. They never obtained city permits. They never consulted environmental agencies. And most importantly, they never got the homeowner's consent. Expert witnesses took the stand one by one. A certified arborist explained the tree's age, rarity, and protected status. Environmental specialists detailed the ecological damage caused by its removal. Property valuation experts outlined the financial loss, showing how the tree significantly increased the home's value and stability. Each testimony chipped away at the HOA's defense. By the time closing arguments were made, the outcome was clear. The ruling came down hard. The court found the HOA fully responsible for the unauthorized removal of a protected heritage tree. The damages weren't symbolic. They were substantial. The HOA was ordered to pay over $1 million. The judgment included compensation for the tree's replacement value, environmental impact, legal fees, and additional penalties for violating preservation laws. The courtroom fell silent. For the HOA board members, the consequences were immediate and devastating. Several board members resigned within weeks, unwilling to face the backlash from furious residents. Insurance premiums soared. Legal bills piled up. To cover the massive payout, HOA fees increased sharply, affecting every homeowner in the community. Neighbors who once supported the board now questioned every decision they made. Trust was shattered. The neighborhood, once peaceful and united, became divided and tense. Meetings turned into arguments. Longtime friendships were strained, and the sense of community that once defined the area never fully recovered. All because of one decision, one assumption, one tree. And Mark? Mark never got his oak tree back. No amount of money could replace 2 centuries of growth. No settlement could restore the shade, the wildlife, or the history that was lost. The empty space in his yard was a constant reminder of what had been taken. But Mark didn't walk away empty-handed. His case became a powerful warning. Across the country, homeowners began sharing his story. HOA boards revisited their rules. Cities reinforced tree protection laws. Property owners learned something crucial. Authority has limits. This case wasn't really about landscaping. It was about power and what happens when it's abused. It was about responsibility and what happens when it's ignored. And it was about knowing your rights before someone else makes decisions for you. Because Mark stood his ground, thousands of others became more informed, more cautious, and more protected. And that's the real legacy of the tree. So remember this lesson. Before anyone touches your property, before a rule is enforced, before a decision is made, make sure they know exactly what it's worth, because shortcuts can become lawsuits, mistakes can become headlines, and sometimes cutting corners doesn't just cost a little money, it costs $1 million. Would you fight back if this happened to you? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and join the channel for more real stories you won't believe.